what is a classical liberal or libertarian to do? Recently, there have been a number of essays asking exactly that question. One from writer C. Bradley Thompson on Substack made the rounds. Thompson's core argument is that classical liberalism has no offensive capabilities. It can't hit back, right, against the deprivations of woke leftism in particular. And so Thompson argues that the conservative, libertarian, classical liberal establishment, and he name checks places like Cato, gave away and lost an entire generation of young people because they refused to defend them or take up the issues that mattered most to them. Is classical liberalism for losers? Because it sure feels like classical liberalism is losing.
I think those things are, of course, importantly different. I actually really, really struggle with this argument like, oh, classical liberals, they never said a word to defend the young people who felt alienated by woke culture. Because I am old enough to remember. I feel like I use that phrase on every single podcast now, but okay.
I am old enough. We've all become old enough
to remember when Reason came in, and also incidentally FIRE came in for a huge amount of criticism for the amount of real estate that we devoted to defending free speech on college campuses and associated kind of faculty wokeness and eventually student wokeness during the era when that was building. We ran an article by Greg Lukianoff reminding everyone that the PC wars were not over and in fact had just gone subterranean and were coming back when no one was talking about that stuff. It's easy enough to say we knew all along. We were something between a Nostradamus and a Cassandra and, woe is us. But this particular argument, I think, carries the least force. The idea that we didn't do enough to defend young people who just wanted to speak their minds. Now, I do think there is the ongoing problem of, as libertarians, as classical liberals, we believe in letting people make stupid decisions if they are making them in a private capacity. And sometimes finding the lines between private and public capacity have been difficult in the last several years. I'm thinking here of what we found in the Twitter files and the Facebook files, when things that looked like private actors making dumb choices turned out to be private actors making dumb choices semi-voluntarily under serious pressure from the state. And that's a different thing from the libertarian worldview. And perhaps if there is one mistake that we made, it was not actually more rigorously applying the question, how is government pressure distorting behavior? Because that is so often the answer. And unfortunately for the new right, that is also their proposal. How can we use government pressure to distort behavior to get the behavior that we want? And that is something that's worth opposing still.
We ran 100 articles on jawboning. At reason.com. Like, we were not quiet in the face of government pressure, censorship in the Biden administration. And I would not want people to get the impression to the contrary.
Yeah. So I do actually want to ask you, though, about the Thompson essay is quite hard on the free market, classical liberal think tanks for their choice of emphases. It doesn't name Reason, but sort of talks about putting out white papers, right? Is this refrain in that piece? And it's always white papers.
We all remember the time that
issues.
C. Bradley Thompson strapped dynamite to himself and blew up the Twitter headquarters, right?
Right,
He's such a bold figure in the media intelligentsia.
Well,
right?
Look, we just spent 20 minutes doing a review of Doge and going through their spending math and then talking about the Ways and Means tax bill, right? And the markup that's happening this week. It's kind of nerdy, wonky stuff. Do you think there's anything to this, in terms of that you should have been focused a little bit more on some of these kind of culture war or sort of young people's issues that are not quite so wonky and not
How
quite
old
so
is C. Bradley Thompson? And I don't mean to be a dick about it, but why are we talking about somebody that I bet most of us did not know or read regularly?
Well, Tyler Cowen also picked up this question, and I think it's one that made the rounds, in our world, and it is one. It was a more fleshed out version of an argument that I've heard many, many times, which is that if you are sticking to the classical liberal and libertarian ethos, you are giving up inherently, because your idea of neutrality, your idea of we're just going to focus on these policy issues kind of narrowly as policy issues rather than take up the fight, that is why we are going to lose. We're going to lose in terms of the policy, and then we're also going to lose in terms of the culture and the youth. And so that is the argument that is being made and that I hear constantly. It's obviously not one that I agree with, but I wanted to see how you guys respond.
I mean, part of it is the divide between that we've seen now for 5-6 years. I forget when it first started, between David French, who's now, I think, at the Dispatch and writes the New York Times.
He is actually at the New York Times and occasionally does stuff for the Dispatch.
Chris Rufo, who is a pugilistic activist who's trying to ally himself with the Ron DeSantis and Donald Trumps of the world to kind of do smash mouth politics. And Rufo has made kind of minor living or a side hustle, calling out classical liberals for being basically controlled opposition, that they don't fight and what have you done and etc. And from the beginning of that argument and debate, I've always found it a little bit curious, since David French, who used to be at FIRE, which is called the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, but it used to be education. FIRE was out there doing the lawsuits and winning them against the universities that Chris Rufo hates whenever they would traduce the free speech rights of students and faculty. So there are just so many different ways to fight. Part of the C. Bradley Thompson and et al. Arguments reflect an impatience with having a direct influence on power as exercised by one of the two major political parties. And it also, I think, reflects a kind of solipsism, which I totally pronounced correctly, that is one of the fatal flaws of all people who get involved in politics. They just want to elevate their narrow tribe over everybody else's, and it presupposes that there is one true way to effect social and political change, which is garbage. There are so many different ways. If you look at the libertarian victories over the years, or classical liberal victories over the years, they came in many flavors. Some of them had to do with having legislative majorities at the national government level, yes, and many of them did not. And they're all kind of different ways to get at the same problem. Do we have is the Second Amendment recognized as an individual right because of politicians? Ultimately, not so much. It's because of the libertarian legal movement, the Federalist Society, people who did a lot of historical research. That's one way to go about things. Did the broad cultural acceptance of gay marriage come about because of the traditional fusionism on the right? Oh no, it didn't. Fusionism on the right was pretty useless about that. It was, Ellen DeGeneres, who is, by all accounts, a troglodytical character, had a lot to do with the fact that we now have we stopped legal discrimination against gay couples getting married. There's just so many different ways to go about making social change, and to hold your breath, turn purple, point your fingers at libertarians, classical liberals, whoever, even conservative, whatever tribe, and say, you didn't do the one true way. It's just kind of a garbage analysis.
Well, to follow up on that, I mean, part of it is that what C. Bradley Thompson and Chris Rufo and certain other people are, they are not libertarian, and they hate many parts of the libertarian agenda. They don't like gay marriage. They don't like secularism. They don't like a change in attitude towards foreign policy, or pot and other drug legalization, which are important things, right? And those are the things that I care about. And I'm happy to see all of these things so much better than they were, at the start of the 21st century. So they're mad that we did not have the same obsessions that they had. I'm glad that DEI is on the ropes, and there's no question that elements of what Chris Rufo did, helped to push that. Even more important was probably the actual foundational work that people like groups like FIRE did. But we should not mistake these people for saying, oh, you know what, like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and you're supposed to be doing our work for us. There's a fundamental difference I don't want to live in the world that Chris Rufo lives in, because it is one where gays and trans people and all sorts of individuals are going to be sneered at, are going to be put down for being who they are. I believe in individualism, and I think I've certainly tried to do as good a job as possible as explaining why the institutions and the mindsets and the attitudes that promote individualism will do well. And some of those are doing well. There's a lot of stuff to go, to fight, including things like government spending and government control over everything. And if you're going to cast an attempt to reduce the size, scope, and spending of government as giving up, then I don't know why I'm talking to you. Like, because you're not classical liberal and you're not libertarian. And I don't know. I get into a lot of arguments. I think we all do. So that was a clip from the latest Reason Roundtable. If you want to see more clips, go here. If you want to see the whole episode, go here. Make sure to subscribe at Reason's YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening, watching, or both.